I'm a historical writer, researcher, and I specialize in the evolution of religion. But I also specialize in sexism because it's a big deal to me. I feel like females are equal people. I know, what a concept. How dare I?
So I would love then for you to do, I'll have you do two, because I'm going to have you do one, the second one where you'll kind of add a sentence in about being a bit of an anarchist, a bit of an unconventional thinker, breaking the mold of certain ideas. So let's do a really basic one. Name, you can put where you're from, don't have to, and the fact that you, like your area of interest / specialty and expertise.
Okay. I'm Damien Marie AtHope, and I'm originally from Southern California, but I now live in Illinois. And I'm an anarchist and a atheist, and I'm an out-of-box thinker, but I'm also a humanist and a rationalist. And I'm a philosopher and also a prehistorical writer, artist, researcher. And my area of specialty, I would say, basically, is the evolution of religion. And starting in pre-anism, at least 300,000 years ago, animism 100,000 years ago, totemism 50,000 years ago, shamanism 30,000 years ago, paganism 12,000 years ago, and progressed organized religion about 5,000 years ago, and then the world religions are after 4,000 years ago. And I also have a real deep understanding and to want to conceptualize and grasp sexism. When did it start? And gender. When did the concepts of gender and how they express? So I also have, in a sense, all that together with other stuff. I have an anthropology type of a perspective that puts together culture, genetics, archaeology, but also environment. Because we're not isolated from environment. In fact, we're often very highly affected by environment. And so,
yep. Continue.
Okay. Is that it?
That was honestly perfect. I love that. I do have one last question, which is there a religion that is your favorite, or one that if you had to have a religion you would gravitate toward? I
would say probably animism. And the reason why is because it's more nature respecting in a sense, in general. It's more, and I feel like, to me, every religion has a form of animism in it, which is kind of a spirit reverence or worship or belief. And that, to me, also goes with the spirit. There's, of course, out of the body, thus there's an afterlife. So, in a sense, all that goes together. But animism, to me, is generally, like, to explain it real simply, there's these people that were animists, and they're going hunting in Africa. And this anthropologist is with them, and like, oh yeah, good, I'm going to go see you. And he goes, yeah, we're going to take food from a lion. And the anthropologist is like, wow, that's something else. And then they go, what are we going to do? We're going to bring shields. And like, okay, where's my weapon? Oh, we're not going to bring weapons. What? And this to me goes back to why I tell people when they go, well, the reason there's a God, some atheists will say this, which is wrong. They'll say, oh, the reason there's a God is because of lightning. People were afraid. And I'm like, you must not understand animism because they don't fear nature. That is a complete fallacy. They do not. They are so at one with nature that they're a part of it. Where we see ourselves as separate. They don't see it that way. They wouldn't be afraid of lightning. Going back to that thing about the hunting. So they go up to this lion and they're, I don't know, say 400 feet away. I don't know exactly. But then they would just pound their thing. Once the lion had already caught an animal and was eating it. They waited till the lion kind of stopped a little bit, like it's full, but and they just pounded their shields in the ground lightly, not like real aggressive, just lightly. Then walked forward 10 feet, pounded him in the thing. Walked forward 10 feet, pounded in the thing. And the guy's looking around like, are we going to be eaten? and they're like, oh no, it's fine, it'll leave. And so the lion turns around and, like a cat, takes its foot and throws dirt over the body and then takes off. But kind of like, okay, I'll leave. Not really happy, not really aggressive, just sort of, yeah, okay. And then they go over there and the guy's like, oh yeah, great, we're going to take this whole body. And they're like, no, we're just going to take a leg. And he said, well, why don't you take the whole thing? It already left. They go, because it's going to come back when it's hungry. and it will see we didn't take the whole thing. And when they get that we didn't take the whole thing, we can come back tomorrow and do it again. And the next day and do it again. And the next day and do it again. It will know that we are not going to steal everything, so it won't feel it has to fight us for the food. I was like, wow!
That's amazing. That's really cool.
But it helped me. That really, I've read a whole book on animism too, but that really helped me to really realize, wow, we think wrong. We have removed ourselves so far from nature that we've forgotten that we can work with it. That we think everything has to be like divide and conquer, and that's not really the way probably we should live. And in fact, if we do that with the environment and only do that, then we wouldn't create wetlands. We wouldn't create things that actually we realize ecosystems matter. So destroying everything really doesn't work. Yeah, cool. I really appreciate all of your time. I'm sorry we went so over, but it was great, and I think they'll really like everything you had to say. Is really cool. Basically, the next steps, we take this, we condense it down to, say, 4 or 5 minutes. We send that to them. We're submitting a variety of people. Right.
I would say there's going to be about 6 or 7 people we're submitting. They'll give us some feedback. We don't know. The end goal is to create a series with a single host.
Right.
Sometimes they end up selecting a few people. Sometimes they do different things. I don't know the end goal at the moment, but I'll keep you up to date as we have progress. Feel free to reach out just to check in. I think with Thanksgiving and New Year's and all of that stuff, it's going to get a little bit difficult. We might hear from them only say early January, but reach out with any questions and I'll get back to you.
Well, I'm just letting you know, too, that I'm open to work with people, and I'm really good at I've done debates, and I generally don't do debates in the fact the way other people do, once again, because I'm, not normal in the fact of how I approach things. Because I don't approach things to win, I approach things to learn. And either I'm going to teach or I'm going to learn. And so I don't try to beat people, and so I don't have always as many problems with people, even though my views are extreme. I do a lot more convincing people than really fight with people. Yeah,
that's good. That's good to know. And then I'll pull a bunch of pictures and stuff from social media, but I'm curious if you have any articles or pictures that reference some of the stuff we discussed.
Yeah, I sent you articles when I did the thing. I don't know if you saw them.
Well, I'm going to pull from those. If there's anything else, when I cut this down, when I create this, I'll reference.
But I also have created my original art. I've had like 100 and something pieces of original art that relates to archaeology. I can show you, and you're welcome to use.
Okay, great. I'll send you an email of this stuff that would be awesome to use. If there's anything that comes to mind, feel free to fire it off. But I know that you added a ton of stuff in here, so I don't want you to waste time until I'll let you know if there's anything in particular.
Great.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
All right. Have a good day.
Have a good day. Bye.
Right, bye.
Us just chatting, some of the answers you give will feel a little repetitive to the application, but don't feel worried about that.
Right.
That's because obviously I now know this information about you, but we're trying to get it on network.
Correct.
So feel free to kind of, repeat anything you had written. I have the application just off here, so if you see me looking over there, if I'm reading something to reference to you.
Yeah, I've done the same. I have it.
Yeah, I'm sure you've done this 100 times before, so you get it. And then essentially we'll just go through a bunch of questions, and it shouldn't be too painful.
All right. Well, I enjoy talking about myself, so
Good.
It's one of my favorite subjects.
Great. That's what I love to hear. And then the only thing, which I don't know if you've done a call like this before, this is being recorded, which will be sent over to the network, but we're not going to have my voice or picture. So when I ask a question, just try to put the question in your answer, meaning if I said, what color is the sky, you would say the color of the sky is blue, as opposed to just saying like blue. Don't feel like you have to remember that. I'll say to you, hey, can you contextualize that a little bit more for me if it feels like it's missing, but we should be good.
Okay, sounds great.
Do you have any questions before we get started?
No, not really.
Awesome. And then the only thing is, this is supposed to be a sense of who you are. If you're someone who swears, go right ahead. Don't feel like you have to be all buttoned up and like precious. Be your best self. And then sometimes it gets a little noisy. Okay, cool. We can get started. Start off with your name, where you're from, what do you do? Give me the basics.
Okay, my name is Damien Marie AtHope, And to give you basics on my name, I actually came up with my name. My name used to be Joseph, originally from birth. I changed it to Damien because I wanted the name to mean something, because I'm not an average Joe. And some of my family lived in Hawaii, now have moved, but did live in Hawaii for like 30 years. And one of the people that helped the leper colony was Father Damien. And I really wanted to be someone that my name meant something and that my purpose in life meant something. And so Father Damien helped the lepers, and to me, he helped people that other people saw as no longer valuable. And I wanted to not ever do that. In a sense, like I wanted to always see the value of people. And so that's why also I'm an axiological philosopher, and axiology is value theory or value science. And so it's a way of seeing richness and depth in things. This really is important for all that I do in life, in my philosophy and archaeology and religion, anything, because it allows you to see things in a deeper richness. In other words, like people say like black or white, is it good or bad? And I would say, well, how good is it? How bad is it? And also knowing that some things are neutral. In a sense, you really can't always attach a good or bad to every single thing. Like, is it good to have pizza with pepperoni? Well, to some people it is, some people it isn't, and in general, though, it's kind of a neutral. And the fact that people are just doing opinions, it's not an actual quality of goodness.
Cool.
And so it allows me to, in a sense, contextualize things differently. Just like in axiology in general, there's like 3 layers of value that we assess. You assess intrinsic value, things that have value unto themselves. In a sense, a life force is something that has intrinsic value unto itself, where say a rock that lacks a life force does not. So the written word, in a sense, is in a sense only secondarily valuable. It doesn't have in a sense an inherent value. It doesn't have an intrinsic value. It has. So then there's extrinsic value things that can do stuff or have purpose or meaning. That's like I said, pizza. Pizza itself doesn't have an intrinsic value. It's not an alive thing. But it can produce nourishment, which would be its extrinsic value. And so this is real important to understand because it allows us to see how things have quality. In other words, like, we would say, if I said that my car has quality or worth and a human has worth, how would I know the difference? Immediately as an axiology, not a problem at all, because one has intrinsic value, the other does not, no matter what you consider the worth of the car. But extrinsic value helps you understand the worth of, say, the car. If I said to you, I'm going to loan you my car, and you're a friend, and the car costs $500, how you think about that car, you're not going to feel like I'm much of a friend because the car's not worth that much. If I gave you a car that, say, is, $15,000, you may feel like I'm respecting you more. But if the car was $350,000, you may not even want to borrow the car if you can't afford to pay for it if it was damaged. So then its value, even though worth-wise is high, its extrinsic value to you is 0 because you don't want to even take this car. So it allows you to... I'm saying, so when I think about things, that really helps me see a richness and a wealth of understanding of how I approach things itself. So it really is a totally different way. So in a sense also, I'm an autodidact. I'm a self-taught in a sense on most of the stuff. I have a bachelor's in psychology with a sociology as my minor. I also did some teaching and some criminal justice and addiction intervention stuff and an intervention. But most of the stuff that I know, even on psychology, I'm way past just what a bachelor would be because I have a real lust to learn. I really want to understand. This really happened when I first went to college and started learning things. I realized, wow, I don't know things. Things that I thought I knew, I hadn't have any justification to actually say I knew them. And I really had only known them, even if I did understand them, on a really, in a sense, linear one level way. And I realized there's really a depth to things. The more I started learning, the more I realized, wow, there's really a depth to understanding all kinds of stuff, which, like I said, once I understood, I learned actually about axiology when I went through for my morality course, which I don't think did me justice really, but it made me start thinking because the teacher told us at the beginning of class, choose the morality that heals to you. And that about rocked my world. Wait a minute. So we can all, since they're all different and they all can't possibly have the same quality or even, worth, you're actually saying that there's no difference or you don't know how? And so I wanted to know, well, how do we know? Then I realized that has to be my first goal, really, is not to choose, but how do we properly choose? And when I started learning that I learned about value theory, which is like I said, axiology, and is the science of value, how you actually assess value. And that's important because value is what gives, in a sense, the substance. When you say a person has dignity or a person has worth, you're making value judgment. So you better know how to understand the quality of value. And as an axiologist, value is not limited to what people just consider value. It's truth, worth, benefit. It has to do with disworth. It has to do with unbenefit. It has to do with, all kinds of stuff. So harmful. So it's not just the good, it's the bad. It's understand all the qualities. Because unless you can assess, in a sense, if I give you to figure out a job, is this job working or are people buying this product? You need to know not just one level, but what the whole market is doing and how does it do overseas or how does it do in this area. You can't just go, well, there's one little segment of things loves it. Well, everyone else may hate it. And so that's important, like I said, to understand, because then you start looking for quality. And also it's real helpful to me because sometimes our first influence is our own emotion. In other words, like if I like something, it's because I like it and I'll love it no matter what. But I need to know, but is it worth loving? Is it worth appreciating? Is it worth liking on a level beyond just my personal feelings?
I do think that you're kind of a perfect fit for this, and I really do want this to be great. And you're so expressive and great when you're talking.
And I wanted to always see the worth in people. And that also relates to me being an axiological thinker and philosopher. And for me, it's value theory, because to be value science, you have to understand calculus, and I'm not super great at math. I'm good at philosophy and deep thinking, but the math, that's not my thing. And also, I feel like my goal is to take axiological thinking, which is kind of like doctorate level philosophy thinking, and make it applicable to people in the real world. Because I feel like if I can help people understand how to grasp the value of things and the worth of things, that really will enrich their lives. This is, to me, too great of an understanding to then leave, into academia where they can talk to themselves. In other words, it's funny to me to have something that's about a worth science and not understand its worth to be given to the general public. So
yeah, it is funny because I also think it's like, and this is kind of a question as well, which I'd love to hear your opinion on, is you kind of are coming from this like very unconventional kind of like fuck you to the system perspective, but making it so digestible to the average person, which is empowering.
Yeah, my goal is really to help the world. I have a very humanitarian perspective, and I'm an anarchist, socialist, mutualist, collectivist, which I just basically boil down to, once again, just a bunch of words. And to me, I boil down to I'm an Anarcho-Humanist. I care about the people, not the elites, and I care about humanity and humans. I really want to help bring about human flourishing. Not just surviving, not just even thriving, but absolute flourishing. And yeah, I do believe that for me, that means that it has to be, in a sense, an FU to the system, because the system was designed for elites, for people, not of color, for people of only, the male gender, for people only of wealth. So I feel like for me, it's impossible to allow it to stay that way. That is one of the problems. And I feel like this is knowledge in general. In fact, even some of the archaeology I understand. If I've had to tell people like, well, show me where you got this idea. Well, it would take about, 15 archaeological journals you couldn't read. For you to understand what I understand. I'm more than willing to give it to people. Just like they say, well, what book did you read? I can give you quite a few, and several of them are over $100. Because once again, academia, charges outrageous. It's not applicable to the general public. So what the general public either gets is this watered down soda pop nonsense that they feel like the public can deal with, or they get something like me, which I'm trying to give them really quality information, but in a way that it is not, trying to fly itself to the moon. With the ideas. I think that there has to be some kind of a balance,
Yeah.
And so I feel like, that's where I think my anarchist thinking is I want to have all this knowledge, but I really want to give it to who it belongs to, which is the people. And I want to inspire people to help other people, not to feel elite. I know a lot of stuff now, enough to where I can hold my own with professional archaeologists on some subjects, but I still don't want to be arrogant enough that I can't talk to a person on the street that knows nothing.
Yeah. So I'm curious, like, how does your perspective, your training, all of this relate to archaeology, history? What if you had to say that you were a specialist in a time, a person, a place, a concept within history, archaeology, anthropology? I know that you mentioned some of the stuff related to the Bible and kind of religion. Is that how you would self-identify, or how do you apply all of this stuff to an area or to a focus?
Well, I consider myself to be an atheist, humanist, a rationalist, archaeological philosopher, and prehistorical writer, artist, researcher. And so prehistory, in a sense, appeals to me a lot greater than say, history, because I feel like it's been, in a sense, regurgitated over and over again, and a lot of times people can look at the same, stats and have 10,000 different opinions about it. I really wanted to understand, how did we get to that? How did we get here? And I first just started, like most people, that are ignorant. I just started kind of in the Middle East, thinking, well, this must be, because they always tell you, well, Mesopotamia is where everything happened. Well, that's not true. Because if you really look at the advancements of people, it starts really in Africa, and then it moves into, the Middle East, but then straight into, Europe, and then also spreads into Asia. I mean, just think that people don't understand. I mean, they were already cooking in pots 20,000 years ago in China. Are you really going to tell me that Mesopotamia is the invention of culture? I mean, but then if you think about that, like I said, like, what's my perspective? My perspective is anthropology, which is basically the origins of how humanity came to be human. And that involves things like culture, and it involves, things like religion, but also gender, our concepts of it, all kinds of understanding of mind. Just like it's about 700,000, I think it's 750,000 years ago that Homo erectus built the first type, like a little, teepee sort of a hut. Yeah, so they're the inventors of modern living, if we're going to talk about and then everything after that has been a transmission and a transfer, in a sense, in some way, that then got taken and that was evolved. And a lot of the evolution also, to me, when you understand anthropology, is you understand the environment. You can't look at a subject and say, well, how did you grow up? First thing you want to ask someone is where you grew up, right? When we talk to people. And then as soon as they tell us, if I tell you that I was born in Indiana, your opinion of me is going to be fixated on that. But if I tell you I was born in Los Angeles, which I was born in Long Beach, I was raised in Orange County, I was raised around gangs and violence, that tells you now in a sense, sociological understanding of who I kind of have a package of starting out in. It doesn't tell you where I'm going to end up, but it gives you an understanding, different than if I said I'm from Indiana, from a, town of 200 people.
So I'm curious, how has this perspective and this idea, or the way that you've seen things, either helped you reshape or re-understand maybe common knowledge? If you have a history event or an individual or a concept idea that you can use as an example, great. If not, you can just talk on that.
Well, it's so many I can't even list them all, but because I would say my understanding of the evolution of religion, my understanding of gender, my understanding of sexism, my understanding of homophobia or homosexuality in general, the fact that we see everything through homonormative lens, the fact that we think about what behaviors should be appropriate in culture, like women do this, men do this. When that all that got rocked for me, the fact of mind, the fact that 300,000 years ago there's a wolf tooth pendant. Somebody made a pendant 300,000 years ago in Austria. So they weren't even human, because humans arise around 350 to 300, the most arcane, in North Africa near Morocco. So someone in Austria had nothing to do with that. That is nothing to do with human, and yet they're already thinking. That's what I consider also mind and the emergence of ideas of religion, because it's symbolism. This is doing something for me. It's either doing something artistically, it's doing something in a sense spiritually, religiously, or it's doing something. So, in other words, an archaeologist or an anthropologist, to me, sometimes they look at things as kind of flat. Not that they can't think deeper. It's just that they're trying to be just the facts, which is good. But I think when you do just the facts, sometimes you're too limiting, because if I found a pendant today, I wouldn't think, oh well, this wolf tooth pendant is just a pendant and means nothing. I would automatically go, well, maybe it's totemism, or maybe it's animism, or maybe it's some pagan thing. I wouldn't immediately only say art. But now if you say it's a pre-human, oh, it just has to be a fluke. I mean, it's just art, and so I find that to be odd, that if you can look at the same behavior but can't attach any type of a common thing to it, I think that's kind of being, in a sense, too careful, or being too limited. Because I do think that there is. So, and the thing of, I would say, gender really rocked me. The fact that the first, in a sense, figurine that is intersex, or non-male or female, or actually a little bit of both, is about 22,000 years ago. So the fact that, because the reason I bring this up too is because some people say goddess figurines. Yeah, I don't know if I like that term. I'm not saying there wasn't goddess figurines at some point. I would say, to me, looking at this stuff, it's probably about 12,000 years ago or so and under. And it relates to basically agriculture and also sedentary behavior. The ones that became sedentary to one place, now we really care about what's happening in that place. Before, when things went bad in the place, you just moved. You didn't have to need someone to help you, or a desire to please help me. That desire, God, goddess, So to me, but the figurines though, to me, start as female, and I think that there's some people, to me, archaeology say, well, it's probably just sexualized. That's not true. The oldest, in a sense, figurine is not very sexual. It almost doesn't even look, and it's about. It depends, anywhere from 300,000 to maybe even 6, 7. But the general thought is it's probably 350 or something. 1,000 years ago, that once again pre-human, and probably Homo erectus, or it could have been another Homo ancestor. But it basically has two breasts, and I've heard something. There's this little tiny cobble, stone from Israel, and I've heard people go, oh well, that's just people reading into what that looks like. But yet it has a little circular hole in it and a little piece of black stone. So somebody put that, and it's almost like where the belly button is. So I find it to be, and in fact, I've argued with an anthropologist friend of mine where he tried to say, oh no, I don't believe that. And I go, oh really? Here's the Oxford book on the archaeological origins of religion or something. I can't remember the name right now, but it's like a $150 book. I go, page, blah, blah, blah. It says right here that they did analysis, and it had to have been wedged in there.
And so what's your perspective on that versus your friends who you had that argument with? Is yours that
his opinion? It's just some rock that accidentally got some other rock pushed into it. It means nothing. It is nothing. I thought that's nonsense. It's obviously some reverence of female. I just don't think that. I'm kind of in between. I don't think that the goddess worshippers think that that's the first goddess, and I also don't believe in some of the anthropology. Oh, that's nothing, just a stupid rock. So I kind of have.
Cool.
And then the first, in a sense, totemism. There's about 35,000-year-old female figurine from Germany, has big breasts and stuff, and it has a vaginal thing, very obvious, female. It has no head, but the head, or where its head should be, is actually a little loop, meaning it's a pendant. So this thing is something people worn, and they've also found a broken piece that is exactly the same as that pendant, meaning there was more than one pendant made of this thing. So it's not an accident, and it certainly shows that, once again, females are reverenced. And someone's wearing
and so why do you think, curious, is there your perspective is unique because the rest of the discipline maybe ignores that stuff? If that's true, why? I'm curious the distinction between you and kind of your average Joe archaeologist.
Right. Well, they would probably say it seems like symbolism. It's possible ritual. But I also don't want to step out too far where someone could then challenge me. Where me, I look at it in a corpus of behaviors. I look at it in where it's at, what it's going on, what other things are going on at the same time in same regions or in a nearby region with the same sort of culture. That has to do with the Orca Nation culture. There's also a problem too, is that Archaeologists sometimes, not saying all, or anthropologists, but in a sense, anthropology is the culture. Archaeology is what's in the ground. Sometimes they focus, because it's this thing. A lot of these are doctorates and specialists. They go out to the site, where this other person is doing more of the culture. Where I'm trying to take a unitive approach. I look at both the archaeology in the ground. I get very into the data, but I also want to know which culture probably did this. And so they're not always talking together, which anthropology does. Anthropology says all these disciplines shouldn't be really separate. Genetics shouldn't be separate. Because if I understand the genetic movements, and then the culture that might have gone with it, and the artifacts that gone with it, and then the how the burials happen, and then so I get the artifacts, the genetics, the burials, the culture. Now I can start to make a better picture.
Yeah.
And so I'm also an artist.
I was going to say, how does this, similar to, because I know when we were on the phone you mentioned Bible and kind of you were brought up religious, and it kind of shifted that for you. We'll talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I was actually raised in a Christian cult called the local church, which they hate being called a cult, which one day they'll probably try to sue me for saying that. But hey, I lived it, so it's my own opinion. I'm not saying as scholarly that I can define it as that, but I lived it, and to me, the behaviors were super oppressive. It's a lot similar to people that don't understand to Jehovah's Witness. We didn't really celebrate birthdays, holidays, stuff. All that kind of things is focusing, in a sense, on you and not God. And God was just a Christian God, and all their churches to them are going to hell because they have a name. Because they're the local church. They actually don't call themselves the local church. They call themselves the church of whatever area they're in. So our church was the Church of Huntington Beach, California. So and then some other church would have been Church of Long Beach, or the Church of, so they don't, but anyways, I don't want to go into a bit about them, but so then at 13, my mother was evangelical Pentecostal, and she thought the world was going to end. So my father did too, before I even got out of high school. So they never really tried to push school for me. So I didn't really get an education. I would say I probably had educational abuse, which is one reason I probably, even though I'm smart and can pick up stuff, math is harder. Some of the things that spelling in English could be a lot better, even though I'm super, thoughtful, because the thoughtfulness was I just always had, and I didn't have the proper education. But these things really clouded my thinking. I didn't become an atheist, and because I wanted to be an atheist. I always people like, well, did you read the Bible? I read the Bible twice. I was a fanatic. What are you kidding me? Duh! If you didn't read the Bible, you were not a fanatic the way I was. I mean, we lived and breathed this stuff. My parents almost were the kind who would have bombed abortion clinics. I mean, in fact, my father lost a job that he got. He's also kind of brilliant. He invented this motor. He saw how a drill works and how it spins without grease forever and super fast and powerful, and said, why isn't a car like that? Why do we even need oil? He started coming up with, invented this engine, and then he was so impressive, just by his own mind, without any schooling him on it, that a electric car company hired him to be like a designer and stuff. But he is so offensive with his religiousness that he lost the job. So that's the kind of thing I was raised in, was, and my mom, in fact, just to tell you a little quick thing to get an idea of how religious I was, my parents. My mom, I had, with my dad, went out and bought ColecoVision when it first came out. And they had this game called, Dungeons and something, Ghosts or whatever. My mom freaked out so bad. They burned it when she saw it. They burned it out in a thing, and they went and walked around the house 7 times and rubbed oil on the windows so the demons didn't get in. You understand? And I thought actually around, I can't remember if it was 14 or whatever, but I thought that I was possessed with demons because I had lustful nature, and so, obviously I had demons. But so it was really hard when and for a while I got onto drugs and everything, and then I became a drug addict, and my heart stopped and my liver failed, but then I went to a drug rehab and got sober. Then I went back to being a Christian, and then I wanted to be, at 35, I decided I wanted to be a drug and alcohol counselor. So that's why I went to school, with every intent to be a Christian. In fact, I was mad because I couldn't go to Christian college. And so I go to school, and then halfway through my degree, they told me, well, if you want to work on addiction and everything, you're going to have to take a class on world religions. Oh man, I did not want to do that. And I think it's so weird now how scared I was to learn. I mean, because it was learning about evil things. Because I knew they were evil. I couldn't ever tell you almost. It's so funny because back then I couldn't even have told you 5, types of Christianity, like, Protestant, Catholic, and I would have gone, well, I'm Baptist. I was just completely ignorant. Now I can tell you about all kinds of religions. And focus on a religion every week and do a paper on it. Not talking about bad it is, just talking about the details. And what I started after I went through the class, I really realized, wow, all these are kind of the same. I heard my own thinking. I heard they all have the way to the afterlife. Only their thing knows the afterlife. Only they know how to live in this life. Only their texts are worth reading. Only their, religious prophets are the ones that are true. I just started going, this is making me think. But I still really didn't disbelieve, but it did make me start to question. And I also learned, something that really shocked me was that everyone, in a sense, the default is female. That everyone has an X, and only an X makes a female. You have to add something to make it not a female. In other words, females have 2 X's, but they only need 1. If 1 X was taken away, they'd still end up female. And if a man, in a sense, didn't have a Y, it would be a female. So the genetic default is female. That started really making me doubt the Bible. Okay, wait a minute. Are you telling me that the Bible says the man came first and out of his rib came a woman, but yet genetics is saying that everything starts as a female and this little thing has to be added to make a male? And then I learned even more about in that class of biology. They said that it takes first anti-feminizing androgens. So you have to stop the female before you get to male. Then you have to have masculizing androgens by make it male. But then it's still not done. Then it has to have testosterone. If it doesn't have all these, you don't get an exact male. Which is one thing why I think it's interesting that when it comes to male and female, like people that feel they're not their gender, or that assigned at birth, or even that they have some gender difference, it's 1 in every 1,000 men, 1 in every 5,000 women, which kind of tells you that maybe the genetics is in play. That the process, it takes 3 things. And that means 3 mistakes can happen. Somewhere along that line, I'm not saying mistakes as your gender is different, but I'm just saying if you're trying to make the product, this perfect man out of the default woman, and you don't follow the steps right, like you're making photocopies, oh dang, that one didn't come out as clean as the other ones, you're going to end up with something different.
I've never thought about it, and that is an amazing, cool thing to think. It's like the Bible saying the rib, but it's like, yeah, everyone's born. I'm
an anarchist thinker. I mean, I don't, just because you say, well, this person said it, doesn't mean I'm just going to go okay, or if I'm not okay without thinking about it now. Because once I started realizing that what I had known before was wrong, I stopped really believing other people. And it's not just like some people are skeptics. I don't consider myself a skeptic. I'm a rationalist. I'm not doubting you. I don't believe you. You need to show me reason to justify that I should start believing you. And so
I'm curious, like with your anarchist, the way that you see, like, is there, I would love, like, whether it's, one particular example of a history, anthropology, sociology, person, place, thing, where you kind of reassess the information, the data, to be like, well, conventional knowledge is X, I believe Y. Is there an example that pops up in your mind?
Well, like I said, tons, but I'll just pick one off the top of my head. Because we're already talking about gender. So there's a guy who did Çatalhöyük it's about 9,000 to 7,000, wherever, years ago in Turkey, which I consider the first religious city. They may not call it that. They'll just say it's a city that has religious stuff in it, iconography or whatever. So there's murals on the wall. And I've heard them say, oh, these are hunting scenes. And they also say, oh, well, they didn't have goddesses. I think they're wrong. There is goddesses. And I think the art alone helps you understand this. And I think that one of the problems is we think of, like I said before, everything is like black and white. Where I think that when you understand pre-religion, before, these organized religions that are after 5,000, there isn't a structure So the structure, the way, at least not a structure, I would say the way we think of it now. I don't think of them also because I'm an anarchist. I appreciate other cultures and stuff and genders and ideas. So I look at the fact that the murals show there's men with weapons, but not all men. Some men are just either naked or don't have a weapon, and they're not actually hitting the animals with weapons. So what they are doing to me is ritual behavior. And this also is good with my understanding of that site itself's archaeology. Because, so the art, looking at the art, I'm an artist, so I think that also helps me appreciate what an artist is expressing by looking at it. I see that there's no arrows, no spears, no clubs, no nothing actually touching the animal. This to me is profound. How can you say it's a hunting scene and there's nothing like that? And no one's actively shooting towards it. But they are doing some behaviors. Some is jumping on top of them, pulling their tail in many of the pictures, pulling the tongue in at least 3 pictures. Now, of these 3 pictures, there's also 3 pictures where there's only one woman. The whole scene, there's like, say, 30 men, 1 or 2, maybe multiple animals, 1 female. Always naked, always big-bodied. Okay, so big body to me already is telling you that if you look at how they were buried, there's a little bit of difference in the weight of the females as opposed to the males, but the males are super skinny, like stick figures almost, or somewhat average. No one's big. And then you have these females in these pictures that are super fat, and also they seem to be almost cuboidal. In other words, not like you would curve a body. Because in other words, what I mean, if you look at who drew the art, and I look at how they drew all the men, no man is drawn kind of weird, So my thinking is that this is expressing probably an ancestor, but I think that when we think of ancestral reverence or worship, we don't think of ancestors as God. But then again, a pharaoh was a god, in a sense, a god-man, or from in a sense, the genetics of a deity. So I think that that's our limitation, how we're approaching it. Like I said, plus, if you understand ethnography, you need to understand that how different cultures understand what it is to do ancestral worship, that varies.
And so you believe, can you give me one sentence about what you believe or what you think those artworks mean? And then one thing, like the conventional accepted knowledge of this is blah. Just so we get that contrast. The
conventional thing is it's a hunting scene. That's it. It just shows how that they're hunting. I don't think it's hunting. I think it's ritualistic hunting with the idea of actually showing off a male cult. And I think that there's a female, I feel it's either goddess or ancestor, and she is there in a sense helping them or watching them, and they're showing off for her.
Okay, interesting. That's so interesting.
In Çatalhöyük, the DNA shows men were eating wild animals, women were eating domesticated animals. Both of them were eating an equal amount. So no one was starving. Kids were probably starving, eating mainly gruel and whatever, and not much meat. But the male and female were equal, but different.
Yeah, and so you believe that the representation of the woman as bigger means that she was likely a goddess or something like higher up.
Yes,
I think that's cool.
Yeah, so I think that it's clear, for me, it's clear evidence. Plus there's figurines at the site that have humongously fat women. And a few of them are buried with stuff. There's also, I think, shamans going on. Because I think this is, to me, at this time, 9,000, it's already paganism. But paganism, to me, comes out of shamanism. But shamanism, to me, kind of comes out of totemism, which comes out of animism. So in a sense, how I see it to understand is, where everyone is trying to say that everything is individualized, I think that's because our mindsets. To me, current day religion is animism, totemism, shamanism, paganism, and that equals, as a package, our progressed religions.
Right, that's cool. Okay, and so I know that you included some of the details of this in the application, so if it feels repetitive again, don't worry, because this is not for me, and for you, it's kind of like going there.
Right.
But is there a question, a mystery, a legend, a idea that you would love to, if the sky was the limit, explore? This is not intended for you to kind of pitch a show. It helps them get excited about hearing you talk about something that's always kind of like intrigued you or plagued you as something to take a deep dive into.
Well, I would say how religion moved from possibly, pre-animism to animism and animism itself. I think there's a real mystery on people have of, when did humans have religion? And my thinking is actually that we probably got it from Neanderthals, or at least got some idea from Neanderthals, because there's the first human burials are basically in Israel, and they're about 100,000 years old. But Neanderthals had already buried someone at 120 in Israel and at 130 in Croatia. So, and it's possible that humans, people say, oh, they did it themselves. Really? How come they use the same tools, stone tools, that the Neanderthals have been using for 250,000 years or so? Certainly at 160,000 years. And down, they're using these mountain steering tools that take at least 3 days of implement, training with someone talking about it now. Certainly would take longer without language to master. And so the fact that they're using them cannot happen by just seeing it and then copying. And then they're burying them in a Neanderthal way. They're burying them with red ochre, just like the Neanderthals did, which again looks like, so if they have the same tools, they're burying it in almost the same way, in the same region, within 10 miles of where the Neanderthals were burying their stuff. Come on. And this is before sedentary behavior, when people traveled 100 miles. The accepted knowledge is that humans created everything, and the humans are great and wonderful. And my thinking is that is arrogant. And that's also not, to me, matching the data. That you could believe that these other pre-humans, in a sense, are in the area that we're in, have a knowledge of burial before us, have a knowledge of using red ochre for burial before us, and have tool knowledge that we didn't have before we met them. All of a sudden, we have this tool knowledge, we're burying like them and using this red ochre like them. The only thing we did different is we threw in burial trinkets. Okay, so we were a little bit different. Great. But that certainly doesn't mean that we invented it. But then those people actually go back to Africa. They were not from Israel, nor did they stay in Israel. They go back. Or, as the archaeologists will say, they disappeared. Yeah, and it's so funny how then all humans, DNA-wise, we know, because there started to be a difference in climate, went south. All humans that live today are in an origination from South Africa. South Africa is big on animism because they bury someone, again, a kid. They bury a kid with red ochre, with ornaments at 74,000 to 90,000. Not that long from when they had been up there. And we know those people up there, or at least they possibly transferred to someone who then came down. Because everybody...
It sounds like there are archaeological remains that are being found that support your idea.
Yes, there is.
Why do people not see it the same way as you do, you think? Or why do you have this unique way of piecing these things together?
Because I have an anthropology type of a thinking, which they're now starting to be more of seeing we need to look at environment, genetics, culture, religion. We need to look at things. And the problem too is, like I said, it's really bigotry also. People don't think the Neanderthals were smart. They don't think the Neanderthals could have done anything. How possibly could they have taught us religion? And so, even though that if you look at the data, and I agree with you, and I've argued with and impressed archaeologists, like I told you before, because I do use the data. I don't just have these wild ideas out of nowhere. Yes, they may be wild ideas to them, but once I explain them and I show the data, and I show the points, I show the reasoning why, they go, oh, I'm ready to read your book. So
yeah, that's awesome. Does it feel good when you're kind of like, you bring up all these things and someone who's got this very conventional idea is kind of like, oh shit, okay.
Yeah, well, and yes, it is. In fact, I had one that told me that shamanism was invented in the United States. And I said, wrong, shamanism was invented 30,000 years ago in Siberia. I go, the first burial of a shaman was in the Czech Republic, a female, which goes, all the first shamans were female, the ones buried. So the burial, is clearly of a shaman, female, and it's in Croatia. And then there's the burials in, Siberia. And even to think, that it had come first is to not really understand. The peopling of the Americas happened from Siberia, coming over. So it's not outlandish that once I showed him that, yeah, this is where these ideas are. And an interesting fact, here's a 34,000-year-old burial that I consider the first shaman burial. And they have these two kids buried head to head with these long, like, spears that they take and they've made out of or bone, like mammoth bone. But they like must have wetted them or heated them and stretched them to their poles. Which is obviously an impressive tool technology. But they find the same thing at 14,000 years ago, or not exact same, but very close to the same, two kids buried with these poles in a shaman burial in Alaska. So I can show the genetics moves over, starting at 30,000 to 25,000. They were in the Bering Strait, where now is the water, and they were living. And then that started to flood, and that floods totally by 10,000, and all those people then moved into the Americas.
Wow.
And some moved, originally faster than that, but so there's some like down in Chile, I think at 22,000, and there's in Mexico, there's mammoth hunters at 15,000, and there's all these different places. So the original thinking though was that the Paleo-Indians, in a sense, or Clovis people, were the first, and that's not really true.
Yeah, and then so when you're either you hear a new idea, you hear a theory that you're like, ooh, something doesn't feel right to me. How do you, one, find something you want to research or look into? And two, what's your approach? Are you reading everything that's out there and then thinking of something new? Are you like, how are you, kind of coming up with your own opinion and attacking something that has such conventional knowledge attached to it?
Well, I don't do it to attack the conventional knowledge, nor do I try to look for, conspiracy theories or theories that I think are interesting. What I try to do is basically look at the data. And so my goal, like I said, is once I became an atheist, in college, I didn't all of a sudden believe atheists or believe science. I've just been lied to my whole life by the people I trusted the most. That didn't inspire in me, to trust people I don't know about subjects I didn't understand. So it made me really go, I want to understand. And so I was like looking like, well, where's the first thing? Where's this? What is this? Where's burial? And I started looking for burials and started looking for data. Where's the first figurines? What do the people say about them? I read articles on different ways. And at first I was probably less archaeological, but the more I started really, I have a willingness to update my beliefs. I call it, in a sense, belief etiquette. That I want reasoned belief acquisitions. I want good belief maintenance. And I want honest belief relinquishment. And several times I've relinquished beliefs. So when I first started, I thought that possibly, there could be ghosts or an afterlife. I didn't know. Just because there's not a God doesn't mean there's not something else. But the more I started researching, the more I started realizing, there's just like this thought. When in evolution did magic happen? Because you'd have to have that. Because you're not possibly saying every life form, unless you're an animist, has a spirit. So what makes humans special if you only think humans have ghosts? There's not plant ghosts, because there's certainly plants are alive. There's not animal ghosts. And then I started thinking too, why is it only things that we personally understand? Let's just say like in America, like, oh, well, the Civil War ghosts. If there was ghosts in America, wouldn't it be Native Americans? Like everywhere? And if people, had been armed the way they are, and we know real history of wars, why isn't there more of that period? It doesn't, if the only ones are serial killers, or what, because they've chosen for some reason, why not wars? Nuclear bomb goes off in Hiroshima, shouldn't there be like a lot of ghosts?
Yeah.
Even saying about logic, what I try to do sometimes is not have a pre-bias if I can. I try to take an idea and just kind of like a balloon and throw it and let it float and say, if I were to be presented this all new, what about it makes sense and what about it doesn't make sense? How would I try to start understanding this?
Yeah, I want to shift gears a little. How would someone, and this kind of relates, how would someone who knows you best describe you?
They would describe me as extremely outgoing. They would describe me as extremely kind and thoughtful, but very passionate. And they would say that I'm knowledgeable, and I'm also a kind of person who is very patient with people. They say that. I don't feel I'm patient. What I feel it is I'm understanding. I understand that if I want to be of benefit to the world, I have to go to the world, not make the world come to me.
And so how do, and again, we've kind of discussed this roundabout, but with kind of this, like, do you self-identify as an anarchist?
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Okay.
Well, I said I'm an anarchist, and then, like I said, to me, it's not just limited only to like political philosophy. I'm an anarchist in the fact of how I approach things. In other words, like how I see gender. I don't limit it to that it has to be just male or female. I thought this way before people started a public front for trans rights and stuff. I already thought this. I thought this like 15 years ago almost. That I mean, not saying that I'm special. I'm just saying that I started realizing that how we are approaching things. Well, also, like I said, the more I researched history, I realized that the concept of gender that we see now, there was like 5 genders in Europe 7,000 years ago. So that's not just Native American. People say, oh, Native American have 2 spirits. They did. Some of them, not every single one, but a lot of them did. Or multiple, not just 2. But so... types or whatever, or beyond 2. But there was multiple things, because the culture really, it's really the Proto-Indo-Europeans that right towards the end, towards 5,000, that you start really getting a fixing of this is male, this is... Even the 6,000 years ago, to me, is where it kind of... It's after 7,000, I consider like... Well, I consider like... If someone said, where does patriarchy or sexism start? I would say 12,000 years ago. Because 12,000 years ago, to me, they break women in half. They make one sexualized and one not. To me, that's a problem right there. And that's my anarchist thinking of not accepting that other people's conceptions. That I realize once you make a person not a whole person, you already are at the fall of allowing you to then not making that person a whole person.
Yeah.
So I see that.
Why do you think the way you see, interpret, understand, go into things, why is that important? Why is that, if more people were like you, why would that be good?
Because I think it allows them to update what they think. It allows them to analyze their thinking in a richer and a more depth way. That, like I said, when I first thought about sexism, I thought about, well, there was a female queen at 4,000 something, in Egypt. And there was also one in Ethiopia, I think, at 4,000. And in Mesopotamia, I think it's like 3,000 something or so. So there's been female rulers and stuff. So, and even the thing of gender, the fact that one of the females I think it was the wife, took the role as Pharaoh. All she did, though, was she wore a fake beard. Yeah, so she was, in a sense, a drag king, But the thought that they didn't see that as weird or as unacceptable, that you couldn't change gender, shows that their idea of gender was not fixed like we try to see it now. And I agree that now I think that we're starting to go back to realizing that we never should have fixed it like this. Which I think some of that goes back to the thing that fixing really is religion. It has to be a certain thing, and a lot of the current, like to me, when and that's my concept of, other people haven't talked about it, but to me, monotheism is monotheism, because tell me which monotheistic religion is not male. To me, I've looked at them all; they're all male, from Akhenaten all the way down. Zoroastrianism, it's from the earliest ones all the way down, and then you even have ones like Sikhism tries to say, oh, well, no, ours isn't really a gender. Really? So then why do you use male pronouns if it's not a gender? Okay, why is all of your gurus male? Oh, what a shocker. You're 13 gurus and they're all male? That must be a fluke, and how about the 7 good people? I think it is, or something. I have to read it to remember exactly that, so don't. But there's something about 7 good, trustable people. They're all men. So I'm like, so they're all men, their gurus are all men, and your pronouns are all male. But magically, it's genderless, And
yeah.
So that's just something that also, once again, I look at, because I see the sex going on in there. The fact that they double talk. They say, oh, it's all about equality. Really? Okay, which is interesting too, because the name for even the Sikhism's deity, or one of the names, is actually originally a Hindu, which they hate to hear, but they get mad, but a Hindu goddess. So the first guru took a female goddess, took away its gender, oh how nice, and then used male pronouns to even be more offensive. But anyway,
but it's so frustrating. How do you not get so frustrated by these things?
Because I care and I want to make a difference, and I know that the archaeologists, in a sense, like I was saying, in a sense, can be too threatened or afraid to speak out like I do. Because, I mean, they got to go work in countries, and they may not get college grants, and I have a friend who is an atheist anthropologist, archaeologist, and he started teaching in a school in LA, and he took down his website because someone had said that he was attacking Judaism because he said that Judaism originally had a goddess. And there is archaeology to prove that. There's a book that proves that. There's tons of artifacts that prove that. It's an absolute fact. The Asher, there's even parts in the Bible that flat out mention it. But
wow. Yeah,
so I mean, but the fact that he said that, someone attacked him and he just took it down. So where to me, I'm an anarchist. They go, yeah, you're an atheist, an anarchist, and you act anti-religionist. I'm like, yeah, but you haven't told me why being anti-religionist is bad. I'm anti-religion. Would you like to ask why? I can tell you off the top of my head 3 things of why I choose to be anti-religionist. It is pseudo-history, pseudo-science, and pseudo-morality. Of course, the pseudo-morality thing really makes people angry, so I go, well, but I can explain it though. See, there's a difference. So, to me, I break it down as in morals and ethics. Now, morals are your personal social guidelines. Okay? Religion gives that, but it's not the only way you can get personal guidelines, obviously. So, and you'll know this is different for ethics. Ethics is the social behavior. Now, this doesn't matter what your personal morals are. This is how we're going to behave. So, in other words, someone could be sexist at your job, but they sure better not act that way while they're at the job. You're not going to say they have no right to be a sexist. They just can't act sexist.
Right. Interesting. That's cool. That's an interesting way to frame it. I like that.
So I understand that real morality is our social morality. In other words, I tell people to explain also, if you were on a planet all by yourself, would there be a such thing as morality? And the answer is no. Because you can't do something immoral to yourself because it goes back to consent. You own yourself. How possibly are you going to do something to you? And if there's no living creature to offend, affect in any way, then there's no such thing as morality. Morality is conducive on the social glue of pro-social behavior or antisocial behavior. And so
that's interesting. That's very cool. And are these, I only have like this question which I'm about to ask, and then one more left, and then I'll have you do your intro again, which I always have people do too. What was the question now? And are these things that are, would you say these are theories that you're coming up with? Are these like philosophical or archaeological, whatever they might be, theories that you read and kind of adjust and think about and then put out into the world, whether it's in a paper or through your YouTube channel or whatever it might be? Or are these like kind of fringe but accepted within certain circle ideas? Like, I'm curious how you're kind of coming up with such ideas and then how you put them into the world.
Most of the ideas I've come up with myself or with the help of my wife. And then, because I talk to my wife all the time. Once again, I respect the, ideas. Also, I would say people online. Because I put my stuff on Facebook and then I get input. I believe in taking advisement from other people. So I share my ideas. I've been sharing my ideas about archaeology and stuff and my philosophy for at least 10 years.
And are you, this kind of brings me to my last question nicely, which is accolades. So it can be papers, expeditions, explorations, ideas, anything that you like to brag about. If you've ever written anything or done a conference, truly anything. It doesn't have to be every single thing you've ever done, but anything that you like to brag about that's impressive or your your best hits.
Well, I would say that the stuff that I've come up with in my blog, I've come up with a lot of different ideas, and my blog has about 40,000 people following it, and I don't pay anything for followers. So I mean, I just basically share stuff on LinkedIn or on Facebook, and so But what's really gotten people is that I'm genuine. There's a lot of people that can push a lot of stuff, but they don't do it always in a genuine way, in a way that my way of talking to people is a lot easier for them to approach, because it's intentional. I make it harder on me to make it easier on you. And so I'm the type of thinker, like I see myself, as a sage, as a teacher. So I would say that one of my most accomplished things is I could say that and people would like it, and so I have a very strong ego. But I don't think it's undeserved. There's a difference. So and I am willing to take correction as much as I'm willing to flatter myself. And so I think that's the unique thing, that to have someone with such a powerful ego, but yet so kind of humble that I can actually listen to others.
Yeah, absolutely. Unless there's anything else that you wanted to discuss, you've answered all of my questions. I really appreciate all the time, and I'm sorry about the lighting at the start. But yeah, unless there's anything else you wanted to mention, I would love for you to do your intro again. Because we're going to be pitching you as a potential host for a series,